Good day, reefers. If you are looking to add a calcium reactor to your existing setup, well, stay tuned. Before I begin with today's video, I would first like to give thanks to the Reef Market SG team for sponsoring the Aquatic Exclusive CR120 calcium reactor, and also for guiding me on how to set up in terms of the host connection. And second, I would like to give thanks to Sub-Zero LT, also known as Leon from the SG Reef Club, for guiding me with the process and the knowledge and the concept of how the calcium reactor works, and also to give some recommendation on what kind of CO2 regulator and perhaps a pH controller in order to complete my full calcium reactor setup. Now, without further ado, let's go through the unboxing and see what the calcium reactor is made of. This is the Aquatic Exclusive CR120 calcium reactor that was kindly being sponsored by the Reef Market SG team. One disclaimer that I would like to put across is that any product reviews that is provided by this channel will be unbiased and will not be influenced by any of the companies that is sponsoring this channel. That being said, Reef Market SG is kind enough to agree to the condition for me to provide any positive or negative feedback, so kudos to them. Aside from the brown box, there's actually not much of anything that's being stated outside the box, except for the product branding. In the box here, you have the main body, followed by the secondary compartment and some joints. So this is the secondary compartment. Along with the secondary compartment, you have a CO2 bubble counter, sponge, the main body with some tubing with a branding that says Aquatic Exclusive CR120, which supports a media of 3 liters and rated for tank size up to 900 liters. Aside from that, you get a Daibao DC water pump for your calcium reactor. Inside the box, we have a DC controller, a ball valve, the actual DC pump itself. For the CR120, the pump that comes with it is rated at 2000 liters per hour with a power consumption of 13 watts. Do note that it's a 24 volt return pump. The power adapter, Allen key for installation, control valve, and an anti-backflow valve. Here's a quick overview of what comes in the box. Some of my initial findings would be the plumbing parts are actually from a company called Sun King, which is mainly used in our local scenes for customize of piping and manifolds. A closer look at the pump itself. All the parts, as you can see here, are glued tightly, so in the event that anything were to fail, there's actually no way of removing it, so that is a concern for me. Similar over here is actually glued tight, so there's no way for me to remove it, and since it's already glued, there's no way that I can use another preferred brand of return pumps for this calcium reactor. Then next, you can see they do a scotch tape or masking tape to keep all the O-ring seal from dropping off. So if you will want to make sure that none of this adhesive goes into your water, you might want to wipe it off or clean it with some alcohol wipes. Another key concern that maybe I'm just nitpicking, but the back of this DC controller, I'm not sure of the material. It might be stainless steel. Don't feel like aluminium to me. So with all these screws, over time, if it were to come in contact with the salt water, the thing might just rust. That being said, there is also no instructions manual at the point when I got it. All I have was some verbal guidance from the Reef Market SG team roughly on how to assemble it. So I felt that it might be helpful for those that's considering this calcium reactor to have a setup guide video and guide you through in case you're considering this calcium reactor. Let's start with the physical installation here. For the pump itself is pretty straightforward. I think you can just slide it in on the groove over here. And we align this joint over here. And next we have the flow piping. The joint over here will go to the below part, followed by this joint over here will be here. At this point, we do not tighten one side fully. In order to align both of them, we do a simultaneous tightening like so. This is to prevent any misalignment which might cause leak at a later point of time. This is for the pH probe, so if you have a pH controller or pH probe like I do, you can just insert here and just tighten it using this joint. And last but not least, you have the second reaction chamber. I did not find any screws or thumb nuts that come along with it. So it seems like with these two holes over here, it is designed to just hang on top of the bolts that's on top of the calcium reactor like so. And you can make your necessary hose connection. To proceed with the hose connection, we can actually utilize the hose that's provided that comes with the calcium reactor that was previously placed into the main reactor body. To ensure a clean cut, I would recommend either a good scissors or more preferably a hose cutter like this. The first connection that I'm gonna make will be for the CO2. The CO2 itself will actually come in from the secondary chamber up from the bubble counter here and goes all the way up here. The first connection will be from here. Next, it will flow into the pot below. It will be recommended to leave some slack for the CO2 hose and make a clean cut. The next connection that I'm gonna make is the recirculating flow. As you can see from the top that there are two knobs and each of them will connect to the T valve over here. This is to allow any CO2 that is trapped inside to come out from the top as air travel upwards, and through the venturi pump it will be sucking the air bubbles back into the flow circuit, creating a recirculating flow. Similarly, I'll be creating some slack over here at this joint. In the event that I have to remove the top cap to top up media, then I wouldn't have to remove this hose. For some of us might find this hose a bit on the tight side to actually fit into the connection. So what I'm actually doing here is using a lighter. Just do a brief heat up of the tip like so. to give a bit of expansion of the hose itself, so that we can fit it easier without using much force. And the last physical connection that I have to make would be from the flow over here to the second chamber over here. I actually noticed some holes over here. We can actually run through the hose like so to sort of guide the hose to the base of the secondary chamber. And there you have it, the hose connection all done. All that is left now is to connect the effluent hose out with the provided valve to control your effluent rate, and also the CO2 input over here to the regulator that I've purchased. Also be connecting this check valve to prevent any backflow of water. Now that I'm done with the hose, I thought it's best to connect the rest of the accessories that comes along with it. Firstly will be this intake control valve. It is just a simple push into this connection over here, like so, and you can control your intake. And next will be to connect the DC pump to the controller. Similar to most of the pumps out there, there will be a groove and a protruding knob to align the connectors. And last but not least, the power adapter. And there you have it, the full setup of Aquatic Exclusive CR120. So what are my initial thoughts after setting up this CR120 calcium reactor? First off, there are 3 models that's available. They are namely the CR120, CR150 and CR200. The numbers after the alphabet CR actually represents the diameter of the main body, which is in this case 120 mm, followed by 150 and 200 mm. The diameter will actually determines the amount of calcium reactor media that you can store in. For this, it will be 3 liters, followed by 4.8 liters for CR150 and 10 liters of media for CR200. In my opinion, there isn't much difference in terms of how big or small a calcium reactor can be, except that the bigger the cylinder allows more media, which require you to have lesser maintenance over time, such as topping it off. The CR150 uses the same pump, whereas the CR200 uses the Taibao 6000 pump. All of this product actually comes with 2 years of defective warranty, but only 1 year of warranty for this pump. My key concern is, as mentioned earlier, all the connections are actually glued on tight. So in case there's any choke, clog, wear and tear, there's essentially no much of a way that you can actually replace them unless you remove the glue and try to glue back the same connectors again. So that might be a concern to some of us. Another key thing that bugs me will be these screws over here. You actually have to use a Allen key to tighten or untighten these bolts over here. What I would prefer would be thumb screws. I think that's what you call them, where I don't have to use any Allen key to actually manually tighten it. Now to the pros of this. At this price point, as you can see over at the top over here, It actually comes with a secondary compartment or reactor, which I feel not a lot of brands that's out there, at least locally, actually can provide. A brief search, apparently there's only 1 or 2 brands locally in Singapore that provide this, and the cost is almost 30% to almost double price of this calcium reactor. The pro of this calcium reactor: one will be the reverse flow design, which allows very minimal bubbles to go back to the recirculating pump, which actually expand the lifespan of the pump. That is something that's shared by Sub-Zero LT to me, so thank him for that. Another pro that I see is that with this long CO2 kind of reactor chamber, you can clearly see the bubble that actually runs through and do a more clear bubble count rate compared to the small bubble counter that comes with most CO2 regulator. With the reverse flow design, you actually get minimal or close to no media marsh that's accumulated at the base, or at least that was what I found out. However, as pointed out by Sub-Zero LT again, to me, to take note will be, as this secondary chamber is not using reverse flow, basically the flow is actually coming from below to the top and out to your tank, there might be a potential clogging that will accumulate by the marsh that will be formed due to the reaction in the secondary chamber. So that is something that we can take note if you so decide to use this calcium reactor. The setup of the calcium reactor did not take as much time as I thought it would be, but without a user manual, I definitely have to do some asking around. But thanks to the close friends and reefing community that's available here in Singapore, I managed to get this Aquatic Exclusive calcium reactor set up. After setting up this calcium reactor, all that I need to do now is to wash up the reactor media, as well as set up my brand new CO2 regular by CO2 Art, and also a pinpoint pH controller in order to set up the entire system. In the next video, I'm going to cover why do I choose the CO2 Art and also a pinpoint controller instead of just a pH probe monitor. That being said, I'm also considering whether I should get a peristaltic pump to control the output, or should I just use the valve that comes with the calcium reactor to control the flow rate of the effluent. Do drop me a comment in the description below on what you think would be the best setup option. To set up a peristaltic pump such as the Ecotech Versa or the Kamoer FX STP pump or the latest Kamoer X1 Pro T2, or simply just stick to something simple such as a control valve. Do let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. Or the Kamoer P1